The plane descended through darkness into a city that the world was preparing to bomb. Muhammad Ali pressed his forehead against the cold window and watched the lights of Baghdad emerge from the desert night like scattered embers from a dying fire. It was November 1990, and somewhere below, 15 American citizens were being held hostage by Saddam Hussein, human shields against the war that everyone knew was coming. The United States government had tried diplomacy. They had tried threats. They had tried everything in their considerable arsenal of pressure and persuasion. Nothing had worked. And so now, improbably, impossibly, they were sending a boxer. But not just any boxer. They were sending the most famous man on the planet. A man whose face was recognized in every country on earth. A man who had shaken the world with his fists and his words and his refusal to bend to any power that tried to break him. They were sending Muhammad Ali. He was 58 years old, and Parkinson's disease had been his companion for 6 years now. His hands trembled. His speech had slowed to a careful deliberation that bore little resemblance to the rapid-fire poetry of his youth. Moving through airports exhausted him. The simple act of buttoning his shirt had become a daily battle. And yet, here he was, flying into a war zone because someone had asked him to help. Imagine yourself on that plane as it touches down on the Baghdad runway. The jolt of wheels meeting concrete, the whine of engines slowing, the strange silence that follows, heavy with uncertainty and danger. Outside the windows, the Iraqi night stretches endlessly, hiding whatever fate awaits. Ali had been warned not to come. The State Department had urged him to stay home. His doctors had pleaded with him to consider his health. His family had begged him to let someone else take this risk. Everyone who loved him had given him reasons to stay safe in America, to let the diplomats and politicians handle this crisis. But Ali had never been good at staying safe. He had never been good at letting others fight his battles. And when he learned that American citizens were being held against their will, used as bargaining chips in a geopolitical game, something in him that Parkinson's could not touch had risen up and demanded action. "I'm going," he had told his wife, Lonnie. "Those people need help, and maybe I can help them." "You're sick," she had reminded him, though she knew it was futile. "You can barely walk some days." "Then I'll crawl if I have to." Close your eyes and feel the weight of that decision. To leave the safety of home. To travel halfway around the world into uncertainty. To risk your health, your reputation, perhaps your life, for strangers you have never met. This is what courage looks like when the cameras are not rolling. The Iraqi officials who met him at the airport treated him with a deference that surprised even his own team. They knew who he was. Everyone knew who he was. In a region where America was often viewed with suspicion or hostility, Muhammad Ali occupied a different space entirely. He was the man who had refused to fight in Vietnam. He was the Muslim who had stood up to the American government. He was proof that not all Americans were the same. "Welcome to Iraq, Mr. Ali," the official said, and there was genuine warmth in his voice. "You honor us with your presence." Ali nodded slowly, conserving his energy for what lay ahead. He had learned, in the years since Parkinson's had entered his life, how to ration his strength. Every movement, every word, every gesture had to be chosen carefully. There was no room for waste. The motorcade that carried him into Baghdad moved through streets that were preparing for war. Sandbags were stacked around government buildings. Military vehicles rumbled past. Citizens hurried through the darkness with the tense efficiency of people who knew that bombs might fall at any moment. But when Ali's car was recognized, something remarkable happened. People stopped. They pointed. They called out his name. "Ali! Ali!" Even here, in a country that America was about to attack, his name was a kind of magic. It opened doors that diplomacy could not unlock. It created space for conversation where politics saw only conflict. Let your breathing slow as the motorcade winds through the ancient city. The smell of dust and diesel drifting through the cracked windows. The distant call to prayer echoing from a minaret somewhere in the darkness. The weight of history pressing down on every street corner, every building, every stone. Baghdad was one of the oldest cities in the world, a place where civilizations had risen and fallen for thousands of years, and now it stood on the brink of destruction, caught between a dictator's ambitions and a superpower's demands. The hostages were scattered throughout the city, placed at strategic locations where American bombs might fall, their lives offered as insurance against attack. Ali had requested a meeting with Saddam Hussein himself. It was an audacious ask. Saddam did not meet with private citizens, especially not Americans, especially not now. But Ali was not an ordinary American, and Saddam, for all his brutality, understood the power of symbols. The meeting was granted. According to those who accompanied Ali, the hours before the meeting with Saddam were spent in prayer and rest. He had brought his own supply of medication, carefully packed by Lani. He had brought photographs of the hostages, given to him by their families. He had brought nothing else except his name and his willingness to use it. The hotel room where he stayed was modest by the standards he had known in his championship days. But Ali had never cared much about luxury. He cared about purpose. And tonight, purpose filled the room like oxygen. Picture him sitting on the edge of the bed, his hands folded, his eyes closed. The sounds of Baghdad filtering through the windows, the occasional rumble of military trucks, the barking of dogs, the murmur of a city that could not sleep because it knew what was coming. What did he pray for in those hours? Perhaps for the hostages and their families. Perhaps for wisdom in his meeting with Saddam. Perhaps for the strength to see this mission through despite the failing of his body. Perhaps for peace, that most elusive of all human achievements. Breathe with him now, in through the nose, out through the mouth. The rhythm of meditation, the rhythm of preparation, the rhythm of a man gathering himself for one more fight. The meeting with Saddam Hussein took place the following day, in one of the dictator's many palaces. The building was opulent in the way of authoritarian regimes, gold and marble everywhere, portraits of the leader gazing down from every wall. Armed guards stood at every doorway, their eyes tracking Ali's slow progress through the corridors. Saddam received him in a formal sitting room, surrounded by advisors and translators. The Iraqi president was smaller than Ali had expected, but his presence filled the room in ways that had nothing to do with physical size. This was a man who had used chemical weapons on his own people, a man who had invaded Kuwait and dared the world to stop him, a man whose name was synonymous with terror throughout the region. And across from him sat Muhammad Ali, his hands trembling, his voice slow, his body failing him in 100 small ways. On paper, it should have been no contest. Power versus weakness, health versus disease, a dictator versus a retired athlete. But Ali had never fought fair. He had always found ways to win that his opponents did not expect. According to reports from those who were present, Ali did not try to argue politics with Saddam. He did not lecture him about human rights or international law. He did not threaten or demand. Instead, he did something far more radical. He told stories. He told Saddam about the hostages' families, about the children waiting for their fathers to come home, about the wives who could not sleep, about the parents who prayed every night for news. He humanized the hostages in a way that diplomatic cables never could. And he spoke about faith, about the shared heritage of Islam that connected them despite their differences, about the mercy that the Quran demanded of believers, about the honor that came from compassion rather than conquest. Close your eyes and imagine that room, the dictator and the boxer, the politician and the athlete, two men from completely different worlds, speaking across a gulf that should have been uncrossable. And somehow, word by word, story by story, Ali building a bridge. Did Saddam feel genuine remorse? Probably not. Did he see an opportunity for positive publicity? Almost certainly. But whatever his motivations, he listened. And when Ali finished speaking, Saddam did something that surprised everyone. He agreed to release the hostages. Not all of them immediately, but 15 Americans would be allowed to leave with Ali. 15 human beings who had been trapped in a nightmare for months would be going home. The news spread through Ali's team like electricity. They had done it. Against all odds, against all expectations, they had actually done it. But Ali did not celebrate. According to those who were with him, he simply nodded slowly, thanked Saddam for his mercy, and began the painstaking process of arranging the logistics of departure. There was still work to be done. The hostages were scattered across the country. They had to be gathered, processed, documented. Every step was an opportunity for something to go wrong. Let yourself drift into the hours that followed. The phone calls and negotiations, the waiting and wondering, the slow assembly of 15 frightened Americans who could barely believe that their ordeal was ending. When Ali finally met the hostages, the scene was overwhelming. These were people who had been separated from their families for months, used as pawns in a conflict they wanted no part of, uncertain whether they would ever see home again. And now, here was Muhammad Ali, the champion of the world, telling them that they were going home. Many of them wept. Some embraced him, clutching at this man who had traveled so far to save them. Others simply stared, unable to process the reality of their liberation. One hostage, a middle-aged man from Texas, later recalled the moment he first saw Ali. "I thought I was dreaming," he said. "I thought, why would Muhammad Ali come to Iraq for me? I'm nobody. I'm just a regular person." But that was exactly the point. To Ali, there was no such thing as a regular person. Every life had value. Every hostage was someone's family. And if his name and his presence could help bring them home, then the risk and the exhaustion and the strain on his failing body were worth it. Imagine now the journey home. The hostages gathered at the airport, clutching documents that certified their freedom. Ali moving among them slowly, shaking hands, offering words of encouragement, his trembling fingers touching their shoulders in blessing. The plane that would carry them out of Iraq waited on the tarmac, its engines already warm. American soil was hours away. Safety was hours away. Home was hours away. Ali was the last to board. He stood at the top of the stairs for a moment, looking back at Baghdad one final time. The city lights flickered in the darkness. Somewhere out there, others remained trapped. Somewhere out there, a war was still coming, would still kill thousands, would still leave scars that decades would not heal. He could not save everyone. No one could. But he had saved these 15. And sometimes, saving who you can is all that any of us can do. Breathe deeply now and feel the plane lifting off the runway, the wheels leaving the earth, the aircraft banking over the desert, pointing toward the west, toward home. The hostages clutching each other, laughing and crying simultaneously, the sound of relief filling the cabin. And Ali, sitting alone in his seat, his eyes closed, his hands still trembling, finally allowing himself to rest. The flight back to America was long, but it passed quickly for people who had been trapped for months. They talked and shared stories, and began the slow process of returning to themselves. Some sat near Ali, wanting to be close to the man who had come so far for them. Others gave him space, understanding that he needed rest. When the plane landed on American soil, the media was waiting. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. The machinery of news lurched into motion, eager to capture this moment of triumph. But Ali said little. He let the hostages have their reunions, their tearful embraces with families who had feared they would never see them again. He watched from the side, a slight smile on his face, content to be forgotten in the joy of others. Later, when asked why he had risked so much for strangers, he gave an answer that captured everything he had ever believed. "Service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth," he said. "I was just trying to pay my rent." Listen now to the silence after the homecoming, the airport emptying, the cameras turning away, the hostages disappearing into the arms of their families, back into lives that had been interrupted by forces beyond their control. And Ali, returning to his own home, to Lonnie and the quiet rooms where Parkinson's waited for him. He had stolen a victory from circumstances that should have defeated him. He had proven that even a trembling hand can still change the world. In the years that followed, the Baghdad mission was often forgotten. It was overshadowed by the Gulf War that came after, by the images of bombs falling and buildings burning. History has a way of remembering violence more than mercy. But for 15 American families, the memory never faded. The image of Ali walking into a war zone to bring their loved ones home remained vivid across the decades. And when they told the story to their children and grandchildren, they spoke of a man who could have stayed safe but chose to help instead. Let yourself drift toward sleep now, carrying that story with you. The darkness of the Iraqi night, the light of compassion cutting through it, the improbable hero with trembling hands and unshakable courage. Some battles are fought with fists, some are fought with words, and some are fought simply by showing up, by refusing to look away, by believing that one person can still make a difference, even when the world insists otherwise. Ali proved it in Baghdad. He proved it throughout his life. And maybe, in some small way, his example proves it still. Sleep now. The hostages are home. The plane has landed. And somewhere in the space between history and dream, a boxer is still praying for peace, still paying his rent, still the greatest.